Hello and welcome to this Morpheus Tech Brief. I'm Martez Reed, Director of Technical Marketing. And in this tech brief, we're going to walk through what's new in Morpheus 7.2. So before we delve right in, let's take a review of the Morpheus platform from an overview standpoint. I do want to go through this quickly so there's a good understanding of the Morpheus platform, and it provides the context for how we think about the Morpheus platform and the capabilities that we add moving forward in the future. So the first use case for the Morpheus platform is infrastructure provisioning. Leveraging the platform to be able to orchestrate the end-to-end deployment of workloads, whether that be on-prem or in the public cloud, using the platform's native integrations or tie-ins to infrastructure as code tools like HashiCorp Terraform, ARM templates, and CloudFormation. Platform also supports the ability to be able to provision and tie into Kubernetes clusters, whether that be on-prem or in the public cloud, via cloud-managed Kubernetes, such as AKS, EKS, and GKE, and then also the ability to be able to deploy the platform's CNCF-conformant Kubernetes distribution on-prem or in the public cloud, and then provide visibility and manageability of the Kubernetes clusters after the cluster has been deployed, and then support deployment of workloads into those Kubernetes clusters. Platform supports runbook automation. So not only can automation be leveraged, such as PowerShell scripts, Bash scripts, Python scripts, Ansible playbooks during the lifecycle of a workload as it's being deployed, day two operation, or during the decommissioning, but can also be executed as it gets an external API endpoint via ad hoc, schedule, or self-service catalog. And then the last two, cloud visibility and cloud optimization. So the platform supports the ability to be able to tie into on-prem hypervisors like VMware, OpenStack, Nutanix, as well as public clouds like AWS, Azure, and GCP to be able to discover workloads and provision workloads into those environments. And then after workloads have been discovered, as well as provision, the platform supports the ability to be able to provide optimization recommendations for those given workloads, such as things like right sizing, as well as ways in which to reduce overall sprawl of the environment. So with that being said, let's jump into the release schedule just for context purposes. So the Morpheus platform includes two major releases of the platform every year at 6-month intervals. So in this case, we're at 7.2. So earlier this year, 7.0 was released of the Morpheus platform, and now we're at 7.2. And then next year, there's going to be 8.0 and 8.2 from a release standpoint within the Morpheus platform. So let's take a look at what's coming in 7.2. So certainly 7.2 has not been released yet. The anticipated release timeframe is next month for the 7.2 release of the Morpheus platform. So we're going to take a bit of a preview at what's coming up in the 7.2 release of the Morpheus platform. Before we do, they got a question. Does Morpheus have a roadmap to integrate with IA tools to help the customer take deployment decisions? So certainly I would need some expansion on the reference to IA, but certainly a question is general around workload placement. Platform does have an existing capability to be able to leverage things like the configuration phase of a workload's deployment to be able to provide some more complex or advanced logic from a deployment standpoint. But certainly more advanced deployment logic is something that we are looking at as ways to extend the platform from a deployment perspective. So that answers the question. So another question, how do we know what the roadmap is for the release of something like 8.0 and 8.2? So question being around how can we find out what's coming in future versions of the Morpheus platform, such as the release in the spring, as well as the release in the fall of next year, being 2025. Certainly, there's an opportunity for existing Morpheus customers to reach out to their account management team and set up a session in which they can walk through the overall Morpheus roadmap from that perspective. Certainly, there's an opportunity there. Great questions. All right, let's jump into what's new in 7.2. There's been a number of updates within the Morpheus platform in the 7.2 release of the Morpheus platform. So the first one being policy label scoping. So the Morpheus platform supports policies out of the box, things like expiration policies, naming conventions, quota policies for things like max CPU, max memory, and there are scopes at which those policies can be assigned, such as globally, at the group level, Morpheus group, user, the role, and various others. This is adding a new scope for various concepts within the policy architecture. So in this case, what's being added is the ability to be able to reference a label. Label is the concept in the case of an instance that is associated with it. So one of the things we've seen in previous releases of the Morpheus platform that has been leveraged for things like dynamic automation targets, or the ability to be able to execute automation against a workload based upon a label, a piece of metadata associated with that instance. This extends upon that similar capability in which a label can now be used for scoping right now approval policies within the Morpheus platform. So what that would allow is the ability to be able to define an approval policy, so something like approve provision, approve reconfigure, approve deletion, and instead of assigning a scope to a group or a cloud or a user or a role, you could select a label in which to associate that approval policy with. So this would provide a mechanism in which to say, you know what, for workloads that have this label, I want to have an approval policy required for this particular workload as it's deployed or reconfigured or deleted to be able to assign that approval policy to those workloads. So once again, continuing to extend upon the use of labels within the Morpheus platform as a key piece of metadata. Group approvals. So the Morpheus platform does include a native approval capability out of the box in which you could specify that before a workload is provisioned, reconfigured, or deleted, that it should go through an approval process. And then as opposed to an external ITSM platform like ServiceNow, Sharewell, or Remedy being used for actually approving that request, it could be done natively within the Morpheus platform. This extends the native capability to be able to provide a more granular role-based access control capability in which I can essentially have a group approver or administrator, so to speak, in this case, a Morpheus group, to be able to approve various requests for that group. Right now, the platform provides the ability to be able to handle approvals essentially on a global level from a tenant perspective, in which if somebody has the ability to be able to approve requests, they could approve requests for resources or requests outside of a group that they would be responsible for. So this provides another level of flexibility from an RBAC perspective for that native approval capability. Speaking of approvals, ServiceNow flows are being added in from a support standpoint. So we talked about the ability to be able to tie into ITSM platforms like ServiceNow for those approval processes. So this leverages the ability to be able to define those in ServiceNow flows, being ServiceNow's no-code, low-code workflow capability. That is, in many ways, a more simplified version of what they previously had with their workflow designer and orchestration capability. So this provides us the ability to be able to tap into those no-code, low-code workflows for approvals as an additional method for aligning or integrating with ServiceNow for change management within the Morpheus platform. The OLVM plugin, or Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager. The Morpheus platform has a number of integrations with clouds, both on-prem, such as VMware, OpenStack, Nutanix, Hyper-V, as well as in the public cloud, AWS, Azure, and GCP. Over the last 12 to 18 months, Morpheus has worked at building out the plugin architecture or framework within the Morpheus platform to provide greater extensibility of functionality beyond what's included out of the box with the Morpheus platform. One of those capabilities that was added was the ability to be able to build or define a new cloud within the Morpheus platform via a plugin. So this is an example of some of the work that's been put in to be able to allow a plugin to be developed for adding support for OLVM, or Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, into the Morpheus platform, in which that will now show up once the plugin is added into the install of Morpheus as a new cloud that can be leveraged, similar to the other cloud integrations, to deploy workloads, manage workloads from a day two perspective, discover existing workloads, and then be able to delete the workload after it has been leveraged for the intended purpose. So that provides another great capability in the Morpheus platform, particularly with the ever expanding market from a private cloud or on-prem hypervisor standpoint. Azure Backup plugin or Azure Backups within the Morpheus platform. So the Morpheus platform supports backup integrations or data protection integrations with solutions like Veeam, Commvault, Rubrik, to be able to orchestrate the end-to-end process of a workload deployment that includes adding or configuring data protection for the workload. This would add support for the Azure Backups capability, so the native Azure Backup capability for workloads being deployed into Azure. So being able to leverage the Azure Backups service for backing up workloads deployed or discovered through Morpheus using the integration via the plugin architecture. And then finally, for the first section of updates, virtual image abstraction. So the Morpheus platform includes the ability to be able to reference virtual images or templates or golden templates or AMIs or whatever nomenclature from an image standpoint that a given cloud may have. So being able to discover those and leverage those for deployment into those given environments. Traditionally, the platform has leveraged our constructed virtual images, and then those are tied into node types to be able to associate the workload to an instance, ultimately up to an instance type within the Morpheus platform. So the introduction of the virtual image abstraction provides another layer that provides the ability to be able to decouple the underlying image from the node type. The benefit of this is the ability to be able to quickly change or iterate through a different base image. Oftentimes, there's a base image for Windows or Red Hat Enterprise Linux or various platform versions that you may want to leverage for given clouds. So let's see, I have my golden template for Windows for VMware. So being able to reference that within your instance types, but be able to swap that out via the image abstraction capability provides certainly a powerful benefit to being able to quickly iterate through the process of patching your images and then swapping them out from a Morpheus platform standpoint without needing to necessarily track down all of the areas in which a specific image has been leveraged from a deployment standpoint. So we got a question. Does the Azure Backup plugin require 7.2 or does the plugin work with the 7.0 version of the platform? So the anticipated version that it will work with will be the 7.2 release of the Morpheus platform for the Azure Backup plugin. Certainly, as we get closer to the official release of 7.2, certainly the more information may be made available in terms of specifics there. And so certainly that would be something that I would reach out to my account manager on to validate that 7.0 might be available from a plugin standpoint. Let's got another question. Does Morpheus integrate OLVM cluster type? So certainly that would be something that we could dig into with our development team and technical team to validate that the ties into the OLVM cluster type, but I believe it does. Great question. All right, a few more updates from a 7.2 perspective. Workflow layering. So the platform supports the ability to be able to execute or assign a workflow to the deployment or provisioning of a workload. And so as part of that process, oftentimes you're installing software packages, configuring the system, but oftentimes there's a desire to combine two provisioning workflows to avoid having to radically change maybe one workflow to align with a specific process. And so now there's the ability to be able to support the execution of two workflows against a workload during the provisioning process. Certainly one thing to be aware of is that the particular task within the workflows will be executed in a random order. So certainly need to be mindful of order of operations as it relates to orchestration from a workflow standpoint. If there's the ability to be able to simply run those particular tasks in any order as part of the provisioning of the workload, certainly then this could be applicable in that situation. But if there's a need to run those in a very specific order, certainly a consideration will have to be made. Uh, Another thing we have is OpenSCAP deprecation. So the Morpheus platform does have an existing integration with OpenSCAP for security scanning purposes. That is being deprecated in the 7.2 release of the Morpheus platform as we continue to evaluate functionality and capability within the platform, as well as the growing capability within the plugin architecture to better address various capabilities in a more flexible fashion. So certainly we do anticipate the ability to be able to add things from a security scanning perspective in the future via the plugin architecture, which will provide a more robust capability and better tie into the processes from a security standpoint. And then finally, duplicate library items. So the Morpheus platform does have the existing ability to duplicate various objects or constructs within the Morpheus platform. So this is extending that capability to things like instance types and instance layouts within the Morpheus platform. Oftentimes, as an Morpheus administrator is going through developing new instance types and layouts and various things, there would be a major benefit to simply copy or duplicate an existing instance type or layout and utilize that as a base for building the new type or simply for testing purposes as changes are being made within the platform. So we got a question. What could be the replacement of OpenSCAP for compliance scanning? So certainly there's a number of available options within the market from a security scanning purposes that could be leveraged to replace the OpenSCAP functionality. So certainly solutions from security providers like Tenable, Rapid7, a handful of others could be leveraged to be able to address that use case. Certainly, additionally, custom automation could be leveraged, but certainly one of the things as part of an evaluation of the integration with OpenSCAP were things like the fact that OpenSCAP, it being a community-based project, as recently as I believe it was May of last year, had announced that there wouldn't be active development on the Windows support for OpenSCAP. So certainly it is continuing to see use, but we do see an opportunity, as I said, leveraging the platform's plugin architecture to provide a more robust capability in which we are looking and evaluating potential opportunities for integration with existing solutions in the market that could be used for reference purposes to tie into the platform. Great question. Got a question. Can we cascade Morpheus workflows from one to another based upon success of the first one? So execution of a new workflow. So there's been a number of things added into the Morpheus platform in recent releases from an automation and orchestration perspective. One being things like the execution of nested workflows as a possibility to embed workflows within other workflows, and then there's also a if-else task or a conditional workflow task that can be leveraged. So based upon logic within an upstream workflow, being able to execute a downstream workflow based upon specific parameters or outcomes. So certainly that could be something that would be leveraged there to be able to execute an additional workflow or subsequent workflow based upon status of or outcome of a previous workflow. So there's a question. Is there a way to export and import library items between test and production environments? That's a great question. So the 6.3.0 release of the Morpheus platform added a capability, which we refer to as import and export, that allows Morpheus configuration of various constructs and objects. Currently is not all objects within the Morpheus platform, but a good portion of objects to be exported out of an existing deployment or installation of Morpheus into something like a Git repository, and then be pulled down into another Morpheus deployment within your environment to be able to provide a test to production-like capability. And then additionally, we do see a number of our customers leverage the Morpheus API to be able to facilitate some of those operations. And then finally, there is a Terraform provider that a number of customers are leveraging to be able to define various objects and constructs within Morpheus in their test environment, and then be able to leverage that same functionality or code within their production environment, obviously changing the appropriate parameters or variables for the production environment versus the test environment. Great question. A question about workflow layering. In random order means that there is no predictable order between the provisioning workflows in the specific phase. So what that means is that the combination of the two are going to potentially execute in a random order. So if there is a need for strong orchestration within that provisioning phase from a task standpoint, then workflow layering may not be applicable in your situation. But let's say, as an example, it might be something like in workflow one, I am installing a security agent. And in workflow two, I'm installing a monitoring agent. In that situation, it may be a case in which it doesn't really matter which one executes first or which one executes second. You can install the security agent first, and then the monitoring agent, or the monitoring agent and then the security agent. Scenarios like that would be certainly applicable from a random order standpoint. But if there is a strong need to execute task 1, 2, 1 and 2, then task 3 and 4, so certainly this may not be applicable or the solution that makes sense in that particular situation. Great question. All right, well, that covers the what's new from a 7.2 perspective. Certainly, that is not all inclusive of the items that will be made available in the 7.2 release of the platform. Certainly, those are the major highlights of what will be included in the 7.2 release of the Morpheus platform. And so, do want to say once again, 7.2 is anticipated for release on next month to be available for deployment. So that would conclude our tech brief on today. Certainly, if there are more questions, I'll look to answer them. So I also got another question that came through about Open Tofu support in 7.2. So certainly Open Tofu support is something that we do believe is particularly valuable. It may make it in 7.2, but certainly it may be a little later after that. So it is on the roadmap to become finalized, but we certainly do want to ensure that it is in a state in which it provides the most value for our customers. So certainly we'll see from an Open Tofu standpoint. And the question is, what does it encompass? So the initial release of the Open Tofu support would mirror or mimic the capability that the platform has now with Terraform integration in the platform, with plans in the future to look at areas in which to provide tighter integration with Open Tofu specific features. Another question: when would Ansible automation platform AWX workflow execution be added to task? So the platform currently supports tying into AWX or Ansible automation platform. The integration is the Ansible Tower integration. Certainly AWX being the upstream version or variant of that. So has been tested, and we do know that it works with solutions like AWX and AAP. So that can be leveraged. Full support of these features from Morpheus. So question, job template, but not, oh, okay, I get where you're going. Workflow support from an Ansible Tower or AWX perspective. Certainly be something that is looked at and evaluated from a platform support perspective, but nothing right now on the immediate roadmap to support workflows from an Ansible automation platform or Ansible Tower perspective. This question around, will there be support for running the Morpheus platform inside a Kubernetes or Docker environment? So there are plans for supporting deployment and running Morpheus in a containerized environment. There are no definitive timelines in which that will be available, but there is work currently being done to facilitate that capability. This question about, can we utilize integration with Ansible Engine community? So the platform supports two types of tie-ins from an Ansible perspective. I'll start with the other one first. The other one being the Ansible Tower or Ansible Automation or AWX integration within the Morpheus platform to be able to leverage an API endpoint on the adjacent platform to be able to execute the automation. Platform does also support a integration with uh, the open source or community version of Ansible to be able to execute playbooks via the Morpheus platform from that standpoint. Question. So, got a question as far as, will Proxmox be in the 7.2 or 8.x roadmap? There is no definitive definition or timeline in terms of adding Proxmox support to the Morpheus platform. So certainly that is something that we're currently and actively looking at in terms of potential support for Proxmox in the future, given our capability to be able to add new integrations via that plugin architecture. But nothing has been defined in terms of the 7.2 or 8.x roadmap as it relates to adding support for Proxmox. But certainly, we do have as I said, the plugin architecture. So certainly someone from the community or partners could certainly pick up that initiative or effort to be able to start the process of adding support for Proxmox in the platform. Then got a question about new Nutanix support. So the platform does not currently support Nutanix Flow. There are plans to add support for Nutanix Flow. It may not be in the initial release of 7.2. Certainly, it may come a little bit after or sometime after. Certainly something to keep an eye on. Got a question. When Azure Stack HCI, when can Azure Stack HCI be added as a cloud integration? There's a lot of interest in Azure Stack HCI. So the Azure Stack HCI capability from a platform standpoint would be a plugin within the Morpheus platform that could be added. There are plans to add support for Azure Stack HCI, but at the moment there are some technical challenges from the standpoint of orchestrating the deployment of Azure Stack HCI workloads at the moment that would prevent us from being able to build that integration at the moment. Great question. So got another question as far as, will Morpheus add Pulumi as an integration as well? So Pulumi being a infrastructure as code tool or solution, similar and certainly very much different than something like HashiCorp Terraform, in that the primary means of interfacing with it would be a more native programming language such as Golang or TypeScript to tie in or interface from there. There are no immediate items on the roadmap to add Pulumi support to the Morpheus platform. So doesn't preclude it from being added at some point in the future, but there are no immediate plans to add Pulumi support. There be any plans around GPU-based instance deployment? It could be taken a couple of different ways, but so I'll talk to where we anticipate taking support from a GPU perspective, and we'll see if that aligns with the question. So certainly, given the rise of AI, certainly there's a keen interest on supporting GPU-centric workloads. And so the platform, we are looking to add support for more GPU awareness from a Morpheus platform perspective to provide, number one, the ability to be able to more natively deploy GPU-based workloads, but also ways in which we can provide better visibility around things like GPU usage, as well as better ways to be able to interface from a GPU standpoint. Question is there any plan to add tenant level permissions in catalog settings? Currently, only visibility options available. I do not know if there are any immediate plans to add additional tenant level permissions from a catalog standpoint, but certainly that'd be something that you could have a conversation with your account manager on, and then provide that feedback on ways in which we can extend that to address additional use cases. Just a question about can Morpheus release more in-depth tutorials for plugin development? So I know there's a few videos that are currently available for plugin development from a platform standpoint. There is a plan that is being currently executed to develop additional content and guides around plugin development and the various plugin providers within the Morpheus platform, whether it be reports or UI tabs, some of the various other aspects of extensibility within the Morpheus platform. It's just a question about adding support for CPU sizing in the guidance feature of the Morpheus platform. No current plans, I believe, to add CPU sizing, but certainly that could be something that is added into the platform at some time in the future. I know one of the things that was recently done was being able to add the guidance recommendations into the plugin architecture. And so certainly that is an area of the platform that we do see an opportunity to continue to extend and refine that functionality. All right. There are no other questions. I think that will conclude our tech brief.